What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. I'm Tyler DeLuca, and joining me today is Richard Cohen. Richard, any news from yesterday involving any particular team?
Nothing much happening, right?
Yeah, just DeWanna Bonner deciding that her and Indiana no more is kind of the vibes pros from a front office sports report from Andy Coswell. And this saga and free agency signing and everything just simply has not gone to plan. I think if you had kind of picked a player that you would want next to Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston as a four, DeWanna Bonner fits that just about as well, just from an archetype perspective and skill set, just about as well as anyone could. But obviously, this has not gone the way that I think probably either party anticipated. And we don't really know the details of the situation at whole, but just your initial reaction now to this as we kind of see how Indiana continues past DeWanna Bonner.
Well, I don't think it was a big surprise in the end because the internet sleuths had found it all out from before the
leave it to W Twitter if nothing else.
Before Annie got to it with the official sources, sort of from banners not being up, from her deleting mentions of the Fever on her social media and all the usual stuff. But it kind of broke down fast on the court as well. Like they started her out as a 3 and then decided, this isn't working. Let's see if she works as a 4. And then maybe part of what broke down in the relationship was that she didn't want to come off the bench. But obviously Steph White and their coaching staff decided that they needed her to because of how it was working out. And then, away from the team for personal reasons, like we don't know what's going on. I always hesitate to comment or make any assumptions about what might be going on with her. There could be a lot more to it than just she doesn't want to be there right now because it hasn't worked out great on the court, or maybe the personal relationships aren't great. But and maybe they're going to have trouble trading that contract because $200,000 is a lot for someone who, for all Bonner's qualities, might be a backup now. Basically, sort of might be a 6th, 7th at best player in the rotation, and most contending teams, which are the sort of team she's going to want to go to, don't necessarily have that kind of room. And even if they do, who's going to want to give up anything of real value? So they may end up just having to cut their losses and cut the contract. Fortunately, it's non-guaranteed, so they don't have to work out a buyout or anything like that. It should be relatively simple if they do just decide to waive her and move on.
Yeah, that's just it's so crazy to me because again, like on paper, to me, this made sense, especially coming with the same coaching staff over from Connecticut. Like it seemed very on paper, just in the offseason, a pretty seamless transition over, and again, just from a skill set perspective and what they were already kind of trading away for different players, like with Melissa Smith, like leaving the fray and everything. Like this just made a lot of sense, and now we're here, and I'm very interested in the points that got us here in that way from a behind the scenes perspective. Because again, I don't disagree with you that on the court, even though on paper I think it made sense. Like we saw the struggle to kind of find a fit. I think adding Natasha Howard also into the fray, I think it got a bit repetitive just in terms of skill set a little bit. And with that, I think that's where some of the struggle kind of came in. And obviously, you only have 5 players that can start, and so there's just frankly limited room into what that's going to be. And you got a couple of those spots locked up pretty dang well already. But I'm interested now going forward because you mentioned the idea of like the most likely scenario here is that she just gets waived, and like notably as you mentioned, being on an unprotected contract is a major deal here. Just in terms of the potential consequences of this for Indiana. Like it stinks to not get anything in return, but also there's worse scenarios of how this could have gone just in terms of the buyout and being on a protected contract and things of that nature. But now we heard that the potential teams that she's favoring are Phoenix and Atlanta. Just from your perspective, like just in terms of fit on the court and I mean, especially with Phoenix, I think is the more intriguing one to me because if she does clear waivers and gets the buyout, they don't have to cut anybody with the way that this roster is currently constructed. So, just your thought on the fit with those two teams in particular.
I mean, Phoenix, you obviously have the relationship with Alyssa Thomas, which is the immediate connection.
Yeah.
I like what Phoenix have been doing already this season. I'd be a little bit concerned that adding someone in like that who would have expectations of playing time and role might upset what they've already got in place. But she obviously, I mean, she's still talented. We saw what she was still a big piece for Connecticut on a team that was a contender last season. So there's still talent there. I would be a little bit concerned, but I think they probably take the risk on the grounds that they're a good team now, but might not consider themselves quite on the same level as New York and Minnesota. So you bring her in to try and maybe take that last final step to make you think that you can actually contend for a title this year. Although maybe you are that once Kalia Copper's back in the fold and back really part of the unit, and you can start building with the big three that they've already got. Atlanta, she'd have to come off the bench. She'd have to be comfortable with that to begin with, because that perimeter is pretty much solid, and I doubt she's getting in at the 4. Although I barely noticed Brittany Griner played last night. You looked at, and then I looked at her stats from. She's scored in single digits the last sort of 6 out of the last 7 games. She is barely part of their offense at the moment, and she doesn't offer enough defensively these days to make up for it at the other end. So, I wonder what's going to happen there more long term as well, especially over the course of the season. But yeah, we'll see how this plays out. And yeah, I mean, Indiana have got, if they do then cut her, then have a lot of cap room to play with themselves. So we see what they might be able to do with a spare roster spot on a team that is a contender and could attract people.
Yeah, no, I'm very interested. I want to talk about that roster spot, but I did want to touch on the Phoenix aspect first, because to me, it feels like relatively low risk, high reward. Like I would like to think that there would be a little bit more leeway if you're bringing her to a team with Alyssa Thomas there, but like obviously we don't know what's going on behind the scenes by any means in that sort of ways. But I would like to imagine, because I mean we've seen DeWanna Bonner come off the bench before in Connecticut, and so that's also kind of what is interesting to me about this, that like this is now like such a key point in this kind of breakup, if you will, between DeWanna Bonner and Indiana. To me, it feels like the potential to be, because as you mentioned, I don't think that they're in that tier yet with Minnesota and New York, and I don't imagine that Phoenix thinks that they're all the way there yet. And part of that, as you mentioned, could be if you get Ka back, and then you feel like you can elevate into that potentially. But I do feel like DB is the type of player that even you don't have to ask a ton of her, and you still might be able to get potentially more than what you're getting from some of the other players on this roster right now, just like some of like the new faces that have come into this Phoenix roster. But also, you're not spending a ton of money on her, assuming that it goes the way of clearing the waivers and you go that way. Like you're not losing any players to go and get her. So the idea of the low risk, high reward of that, and the potential of just making that little extra boost up into that contender area of the WNBA, which is to me, again, New York and Minnesota, like pretty clearly right now. If they're able to make this work to its best ability, there's a possibility that could be the move that helps elevate them into that contender tier. I still don't think it would get them all the way up to New York and Minnesota status, but if you get Ka back, if you get DB operating at a high level, and you continue to build on what you're already having, I'd be intrigued. I'd be intrigued by that, especially with how low risk it ends up being in that cutting and clearing the waivers way. But I am interested for Indiana. Like, who are you eyeing? Because like to me, I think the hardest part about this is that this is happening mid-season. Like if this was something like, okay, like if you decide like, you're going through free agency and like, okay, we had these conversations and we decided this is just not the move, you can go make other things happen. Right now, it's a little bit tougher, and there's not like some clear cut player to me, like in terms of like what you were hoping DeWanna Bonner brought to this team. I don't know who exactly is out there in terms of just general players. Obviously, Aari McDonald is still not signed to a team and just saw the success there. Is it a matter of, do you think Indiana maybe kind of just shifting the style a bit more and going and maybe just getting Aari in and bringing her in, or are you trying more so to sign to replace DeWanna Bonner?
I mean, I think your dream target would be Emma Miesemann if she
Right.
was.
That's everyone's dream target.
Yeah,
Look,
exactly.
if you could get Emma Miesemann, any team is doing that. So that's the only name I've been able to come up with from like a forward perspective
Yeah.
of like immediate replacement. But I don't know if that's I don't know how plausible that actually ends up being realistic.
Yeah. No, I agree there. Yeah, I do think there's the potential to be more movement around the trade deadline than we normally see in typical years, because we're in this weird situation where we're heading into everyone being a free agent at the end of the season, the new CBA. So there's not a lot of point in holding on to anyone apart from maybe the one player you would call, or anyone on a rookie scale contract. So anyone between those two levels is. And as we record,
look at that. Well, as literally as we are recording this, Indiana has waived Bonner and signed Aari McDonald for the remainder of the season. So, Richard, what are your thoughts on signing Aari McDonald for the rest of the season? There we go.
Well, I mean, one of my thoughts is that my dissection of the rules has been proven right, that they did have to wait the 10-day waiting period after releasing her from her hardship contract, which she was just yesterday legal for them to re-sign to a normal contract. But yeah, I mean, she showed when she was there on the hardship that she can be useful for them, even when they've got the option of their veteran point guard
Sid Colson.
Yeah, Sid Colson.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, the name disappeared on me there for a minute. Yeah, they've got that, but Aari's a slightly different kind of player, more electric, more quick offense, and yeah, so that gives them another scorer. And yeah, maybe they do swing small. We've seen them playing a smaller lineup a lot more in the last couple of weeks since Bonner was gone entirely, and sort of Cunningham's sort of the closest thing they have to a 4 on the court a lot of the time, and they basically play 4 out with one big, who's usually Boston. Maybe they go to that more and just rely on more running, more pace to the offense. As we were talking about before we started recording, in order to do that, it'll help if Caitlin Clark can start hitting some shots.
Yeah.
But that could be the plan going forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's gonna end up being the shift. Like, I think especially now that we know that that's official. Like, Aari is perfectly suited to play fast. Like, no, I don't know how many players are just like athletically faster than Aari McDonald in the entire WNBA, just in terms of like just pure raw speed. Anyway, so like you add her in, and that's exactly what I think would be the idea. I feel like it hasn't been I don't know if as easy is the word, maybe as frequent, but like just in terms of like thinking of like those like home run fast break plays, like where we see Caitlin throwing the long ball, like in comparison to last season, I just feel like generally speaking, we haven't seen that as much over the course of this season. And those are easy buckets that if you're able to go and get a stop and just, I mean, Caitlin is one of the greatest passers I've ever seen at just making that full court fast break pass and just an immediate fast lay. We've seen it a couple times. Like it certainly hasn't like been non-existent, but I feel like just in terms of the frequency, it feels like it's been a little bit lighter this season. If you're able to go and get that, those are easy buckets, like, and just immediately. And the type of players like Kelsey Mitchell that could just immediately go, and Aari McDonald that could just immediately go and run down the court, like that is, I feel like, what you have to kind of shift to. And obviously, you still have a player in like Natasha Howard that can go and you can play two bigs, right? And so, like, if you're matching up against a New York Liberty, you have at least two players capable of being a kind of double big scenario. But I think a major part to this is that you have a player now. Obviously, you go and get Sophie Cunningham in the offseason, which is major. But Lexi Hull is genuinely turning into like a bona fide premier role player to me in this league, just in terms of 3-point shooting, the defense, and everything. And I feel like that's so massive in this, just because again, you have your 1 and 2 and your 5 that are set, and pretty much Natasha Howard. Like, it'd be interesting to seeing if there's any shift in that, but I don't really imagine a starting lineup shift in that way. But being able to put Lexi Hull and Sophie Cunningham on the court together just opens up so many different like combinations and everything. And I've been so impressed with the role players on this team, and specifically Lexi Hull. Again, it's not like anything like particularly new, as much as it just like is a solidification that like Lexi Hull is this caliber of player and just fits next to Caitlin and Aaliyah perfectly in my eyes. But I guess from that perspective, in terms of playing fast, like is there any players that you would be specifically looking at? You mentioned Sophie. Like for me, it's Lexi. Like if you're trying to amplify the speed and you're trying to shift the kind of the identity in a way of this team, like who are you looking for to kind of, I guess, be the main cogs in that way?
I like if they're going smaller, then Cunningham needs to step up a little more than she
Mhm.
has. You wonder whether they at least give Timpson a look now that
That's also who I'm intrigued by. Yeah.
they're going to have to go a little deeper down the rotation unless they add someone, because Dantas is off to AmeriCup, so they're going to have to
Hmm.
go a little deeper down because of that as well. So Brianna Turner either has to play or they have to at least look at Timpson. But yeah, Howard's been kind of interesting in that she was kind of a natural fit. It sort of felt like she was always going there in the off season because
Hmm.
once she said, "I'm out of Dallas," basically almost the minute their season
Yeah.
ended,
Right.
Indiana seemed like the obvious fit because she wasn't the superstar 4 level, but she was established, has a good defensive reputation,
Hmm.
veteran. They had a hole at the 4 alongside Boston. So, but there've been a lot of games like last night where she sort of played sort of 10, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and then they've switched small. She's not really set the world alight since going
Hmm.
there. So I think they need her to step up to a certain extent as well. That's not part of playing quicker, but that's part of being more solid defensively,
Yeah. Agreed.
especially against teams that can put size against them, where Boston can't be your only option to play defense on the interior, especially because Clark Mitchell is always going to present problems for a defense, your own defense, not just
Right.
the other
Yeah.
team's
Both
defense.
ways. Yeah.
Because they're always going to be small. Caitlin's not the greatest defender in the world, however
Mhm.
much her fans would like to believe she's fantastic at everything. Um, so yeah, you need that solid base behind them, and yeah, sometimes you're not going to be able to get that from a small lineup.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think ultimately, if you want to play fast, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, um, Caitlin Clark has to get out of this slump. I mean, it's been a rough it's been a rough stretch of games, generally speaking, since coming back from her injury. I mean, 3 of 13 as we're recording this last night against Seattle, 3 of 13 from the field, 0 of 6 from three, 9 assists, but 8 turnovers and only 6 points. I mean that. I mean, again, like you normally whenever the turnovers is kind of part of the Caitlin Clark experience. Not to say that it's not something you want to get better at, but like you kind of understand where that's coming from, and like the responsibility that she has on the ball and initiating so many different things. So like to a point, you almost like factor that into the play. However, you also factor more than 6 points into that play. So if you're getting 9 assists and 18 points, those 8 turnovers still hurt. Don't get me wrong, but like you're able to stomach it a little bit better. That hasn't happened. Obviously, they still go on to win because Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell were look incredible in that game. But for you, just I guess just generally speaking, over the course of the kind of this Caitlyn slump, like, is there anything that's kind of stood out to you just on the court of that being different? I mean, it's been a pretty rough stretch.
I mean, she looks healthy. It doesn't look like she's sort of limping or anything like that. She doesn't
Mm,
look a step slower than usual. Just nothing's dropping. I did think Seattle did a good job on her defensively last night,
hmm.
and partly it was because because their defense was so slanted towards her was part of why the rest of the team got so open.
Yeah, fair enough.
She
Yeah.
obviously still has this enormous gravity
Hmm.
in terms of drawing defenses and getting her teammates open. No one's going to say, well, we can just leave Caitlin today and we'll cover the rest of the team because she's still got that threat. But yeah, I mean, I've been pointing out that the splits home and road at the moment are staggering in that
Mm,
she is 22 of 50 from 3-point range at home and 1 of 28 on the road.
goodness, that'll
Um,
do it.
I mean, that's partly just because the last 3 games were on the road. So
Yeah.
this same streak of bad shooting since she came
Hmm.
back from the injury has mostly been the road games that she's played this season. But yeah, I mean, I imagine it will balance out. She will start hitting some shots and get back in some kind of rhythm. But at the minute, it's been so bad lately that it has to be a little bit in her head. However good a shooter she's been for however long. you have to start thinking about it at some point. Like we've seen with Brianna Stewart lately, that I think like a few weeks back, it sort of clicked for Brianna that, oh, maybe my 3-point shooting has been bad enough for long enough now that it's not coming back like it used to be. And then she locked in, and she's been incredible from 2. She's started driving, she's creating contact, she's getting to the line, she's doing everything she can to produce without the threes. And yeah, maybe Caitlin needs to sort of take a page from that book and sort of slide more towards that approach, and then the threes will come back as part of the scoring from other routes.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I'm intrigued that like how else can you try to get Caitlin rolling at like in terms of just systematically like how you are getting her shots. The idea I know our producer BMAC was talking about the Iverson cut, and getting her off the ball and moving and because like Caitlin can get to the rim. Like, obviously she's known for her 3-point shooting, but she can certainly get to the rim. And so I'm intrigued if that becomes a pivot, like just to see some shots go in at this point. Like, and like just put some points on the board for the team as well. Because it's again, like I agree with you in terms of like at some point it has to come in mentally to some level. I think Caitlin is one of the most like confident basketball players you have to be to go and take the shots that she's taking, right? And has been making. But I mean, for as long as we've known about her, like this has been who Caitlin Clark has always been. I don't know if we've ever seen a slump in this type of way before. We've certainly seen like bad games, but like I feel like generally speaking, the bounce back has always been pretty quick for Caitlin. I think it's I'm not gonna act like I'm some level of doctor or anything like that, but I mean it's interesting that it comes like the first time we see a slump is the first time really we've seen her out injured like ever. And I would be interested in knowing, and I'm not suggesting because I don't know. I'm not smart enough to go and figure that out. But like I'd be interested in knowing if there is any level of correlation, whether it be physical, mental, like whatever form that takes. Like it is a very interesting kind of connection there in that way. But just from a larger Fever perspective, obviously they win that game against Seattle. So as much as we're talking about, oh, Caitlin needs to be better and everything, they still go out and beat Seattle. And to me, the jump from Aaliyah Boston this season, and I don't know. It's interesting because again, I don't know if it's anything new to her game. Like this is what Aaliyah Boston has always been, a great finisher at the rim. She's been dominant. Like this is a lot of what Aaliyah Boston has done. We're seeing the volume go up more and more, and I love that. And the more that they can play through Aaliyah, especially during this slump for Caitlin, the better in that way. But for you, just in general, whether it be from this stretch or through a season, like what has impressed you about what Aaliyah Boston has been able to bring to this team?
She looks incredibly comfortable. It looks like she's just settled. That there's not any kind of hesitation to what she's doing, what she's thinking on the court. She's just settled, knows what she's doing, knows what she wants to do when the ball arrives at her. She still doesn't take that many shots, but we saw that. From someone like Sylvia Fowles. You don't need to take that many when you're shooting 60% from the field. You're still going to put up 15, 18 points a night because you're hitting everything you take. So she's selective, but yeah, she's been very effective. I imagine she'll be an all-star again. And then last night we got a Kelsey Mitchell game from like 3 years ago where, this is the kind of game that Kelsey Mitchell can have. We know that. We know the kind of offensive explosion she can produce on her kind of night.
Yeah, and again, like the fact that the Indiana Fever are able to go and win that game against a good Seattle team that's been a little bit of a roller coaster just in terms of like what version you're getting on a given night, but like we know how good Seattle can be, and you go to their place and beat them and on and off Caitlin night, because that's I think the biggest thing right now. Amidst the struggle that you can potentially kind of become a positive in the long term is figuring out how to do it, quote unquote, without Caitlin. Like if you're not getting the massive game from Caitlin, like you are finding players. Kelsey Mitchell is back-to-back really solid games. Aaliyah Boston has been fantastic just the entire season, frankly, and this was one of her best performances. But looking ahead now, you have in the coming days, their next 5 games are LA, Dallas, Las Vegas, LA, Golden State. Those are your next 5. And so, like, in terms of kind of just looking ahead generally, this kind of feels like a stretch where you want to try and you want to try and get this figured out with Caitlin Clark, because you have on the horizon past that, you have 2 games against New York back to back in New York. Those are, I mean, we've seen how those games have gone so far between them. Like, you got a game against Atlanta immediately after that 5-game stretch. Like, this feels like kind of the time where you're really hoping to get it figured out, and hopefully it doesn't kind of bleed over into All-Star break in that way. And like you're hopefully you kind of get this figured out before that happens. Which again, I'm not sounding the fire alarm or anything by any means, or thinking that Caitlin Clark isn't going to be back or by anything like that, because I mean, she's one of the best hoopers in the game, but it's impossible to ignore this slump that she's going on. But I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see it, and I've been very impressed by some of the others surrounding her. Even in some of the losses that they've had, to be able to perform in the way that they've been able to. But Richard, I know I mentioned All-Star Weekend. I know you got a little thing coming up. So let the people know what's going on.
I mean, yeah, people may remember it from previous years. I'm recording the Pick Our All-Stars podcast with Kevin Pelton at the end of the week. So that should be out Saturday. I think we're recording it Friday, but should be out Saturday for everybody.
Heck yeah. I can't wait. I'm tuned in, Richard. I appreciate you, Richard, for tapping in, talking some Fever basketball with me today. Make sure you guys stay tapped in across the board for the Her Hoop Stats podcast, so you can get the All-Star pod, you can get the weekly podcast, the daily podcast, excuse me. I mean, come on now. We're a little bit more ramped up here on Her. Come on.
Yeah, constantly available.
It's daily. It's daily. So make sure you subscribe so it's hitting your inbox all the time, every day. And we'll see you next time.